Day 3 of the World Economic Forum at Davos, and we are in conversation with a very special guest, Mr. Dinesh Khara of State Bank of India. With us, Mr. Khara, thank you so much for taking the time out and agreeing to talk to us.
Thank you very much for having me on your channel.
No, the pleasure is entirely ours. I would like to start off with the big debate that I thought came out. While we came in, it was all about AI, sustainability, etc. We at NDTV Profit were trying to ask all global corporations about their view of higher for longer interest rates in a year when rates would come off. And a clutch of them, including the global chairman of ABB, IKEA and some others, said that maybe rates may not come down as quickly as the street anticipates. I would love to understand from you, both from a global context and the Indian context. What's your view on rates?
Well, as far as India is concerned, I would say that the Reserve Bank of India decoupled itself quite some time back.
Right.
And here the consideration is primarily the inflation. And what we are observing is that inflation did see less than 5% in the month of November. Now it was 5.5. So I think MPC is very closely watching the inflation trajectory, and based upon that, there would be the likelihood of the interest rate cuts. And even my expectation is that maybe towards the third quarter of the next financial year, 24-25, we might get to see some kind of interest rate cuts.
Okay. What about the global picture, Mr. Khara? I mean, any thoughts there?
Well, as far as the global scenario is concerned, I would say that the volatility as far as the inflation is concerned is quite high. And in many of the geographies, it is also contributed by some of the supply side factors. So I think the economies are quite alive to this situation, and they are trying to address those aberrations, and which will eventually help them in addressing the inflation concerns. And the Fed has already gone on record that they intend to cut at least have 3 rate cuts in the next financial year. So in this calendar year, this is what they are saying.
Exactly.
So I think maybe there also it would be probably we'll get to see somewhere in the month of October, November type of those are the timings which we expect that we should have some interest rate cuts at least in the US.
Okay, so bunched up in the second half, if you will, not necessarily the first half.
That's
on both aspects. Okay, the second aspect is about growth. I mean, everybody talks about India as being the oasis of growth, primarily also because it seems that in a fragmented world, there are very few areas which will actually be able to show strong growth. Your sense in the conversations that you've had here and even otherwise?
No, see, if you look at the structural aspect of the Indian economy, we are more internally focused. It's more of a domestic economy which is of significance, or maybe of a significant proportion of the total GDP. So I think that is one of the reasons why we are quite insulated as far as the rest of the globe is concerned. I'm not saying that we are totally decoupled, but yes, of course, we have a much larger proportion of the domestic demand, which actually guides the trajectory of the GDP in the country. So having said that, we have got a growing middle class population who have got aspiration, ambitions, and also there is enough demand which is seen in the domestic economy. So I think to that extent, the kind of growth trajectory which we have seen in the till now, when rest of the globe is not doing all that well, we hope that we will continue to have this kind of a growth going forward. And apart from that, the kind of focus which we have for infrastructure creation, which has got a significant multiplier effect too. So that is the other area which will also propel the growth. The third aspect which I must highlight is essentially relating to the focus on the renewables, focus on EVs, batteries, and battery storage. So these are the newer levers of growth which you have seen. And also this will also add to the growth momentum in the country.
So would you reckon that even if the global growth doesn't pick up, and a few people anticipate that maybe it will be back-ended in this current calendar, that the Indian growth engine chugging along the way it is could bring that elusive private capex in front and center in calendar year 24?
Well, if you look at as far as the private capital which is being talked about quite a lot, I would also like to highlight some of the data points. As for the CMI data in the year 22, financial year 21-22, there was a commitment of 35 trillion Indian rupees.
Okay.
Even in the current financial year 23-24 also, in the first quarter, we have already seen the commitment of 20 trillion. So this is a very clear reflection that the private entrepreneurs are evaluating the investment decisions. Part of this investment at times is also met from their cash accruals in the balance sheet. And also when it comes to the debt which they are raising, there is always a lag effect, particularly when it comes to the capacity addition. So it gets spread over a period of time. So I would say that though it is being talked about, and I hope that the way the commitments have been made, that itself is a reflection that there is enough confidence. It could be a matter of time when we will actually get to see that on paper also in terms of the debt which they are raising from the market or from the banking system.
Actually, that was going to be my next question. A lot of talk about whether banks are the preferred modes of financing or is it internal accruals. Is it because the numbers are relatively smaller right now that the bank numbers are not showing, and will they come to the fore soon?
I tend to believe that. And actually speaking, when we look at our pipeline for the corporate credit or the project finance, we get to see decent traction. And that itself is a reflection that the corporates are looking at borrowing from the banking system. And once we sanction the loan, and the availment actually depends upon the stage of development. So that is something, that's the reason why it's all staggered over a period of time.
Okay, but does it kind of show up in the way, numbers, or the street would love to see the numbers sometime in calendar year 24?
No, even in the last quarter itself, when it comes to our corporate book, we grew about 7%.
Right.
So I hope to see better growth in the days to come as far as the corporate book is also concerned.
Okay. A word on the retail book. I mean, a lot of caution, and rightfully so, sounded off by the central bank as well. Do you reckon for you or for the street at large, does this bring about a heavy slowdown in unsecured lending and therefore loan growth on that aspect?
I would say not for State Bank of India at least, because when it comes to our unsecured book, which is actually almost equal, or if not equal, at least better than the secured book also, because we are lending to our existing customers only and those who are maintaining their salary accounts. And our ticket size is also on the higher side. And when we look at our gross NPA and the way this book is behaving, it is perhaps doing pretty well. Where our gross NPA, as far as the retail is concerned, is somewhere around 0.60%. So I would say that it is one of the best book, and as far as the retail space is concerned. So for us, it is not a challenge at all. But yes, of course, when it comes to, and we are growing well also, we are about 16-17% kind of a growth we are seeing in this book also. And but yes, of course, there was at the system level, the unsecured had started growing at a very fast pace of about 30%. And that was the reason why perhaps the Reserve Bank of India thought in terms of applying brakes. And they increased the risk weights, and also have in fact, they were having a concern relating to the lower ticket size, which was about 50,000 or less than 50,000. So our book is very, very different in terms of color and complexion.
But for the rest of the street, you believe a marked slowdown? Or
I would say that maybe there could be some slowdown as well as the NBFCs loaning to the unsecured credit is concerned.
Okay. I have one final piece, and that is due to a couple of comments that the way we read it seems to be that the large private banks are saying that there is, the PSBs are being super competitive on this corporate lending piece, and could there be mispricing concerns or thereabouts? Now, I don't know if you got a chance to see any of some of those comments, but I would love to hear your views if you have any on this.
No, I think it is a decision which is taken at the management level and the board level of each of the bank. And they have to price the risk according to their risk appetite. And I assume that due considerations are there for each of the bank. I would not be in a position to comment at a broad brush level relating to the pricing which is being done by various other public sector banks. But as far as State Bank of India is concerned, we are quite mindful in terms of we should have the right kind of a pricing for the risk which we are undertaking.
Okay, so in some sense you're telling me that mispricing or the way the questions are coming about, that doesn't seem to exist per se in your mind.
I have not really looked into because this is something beyond my remit also. So that's the reason why but yes, of course, as far as we are concerned, we are quite mindful in terms of the risk which we undertake and the price at which we should undertake that risk.
Got it. Sir, one final question. As you walked through the promenade the last 2 days, there seems to be a very large India presence. In some sense, maybe a bit more toned down from the from maybe the flash that was there the last time, but enough and more presence, state pavilions, company pavilions. Is the India rhetoric loud and kicking to your mind as you?
Very much. I would say that as far as the India story is concerned, it has become quite credible over the years. And when it comes to the global investors, they're all acknowledging the same.
Are you sensing that in your conversations out here as well?
Yes.
Great. Okay. Lovely talking to you, Mr. Khara. Thank you so much for taking the time out and being with us.
Thank you.
On
Pleasure.
NDTV Profit. And viewers, thanks for tuning in.